The judge laughed at him. The lawyers mocked him. The entire courtroom thought he was a fool for daring to represent himself. But what no one knew was that this young man carried a secret, a legal mind so sharp, it would leave everyone in shock. By the end of the trial, the same people who laughed would be sitting in stunned silence. This is the story of how Marcus Daniels turned humiliation into the most powerful courtroom victory they'd ever seen. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed across the crowded courtroom, silencing the murmurs that filled the air. All eyes turned as the heavy doors creaked open and a young black man stepped inside. His suit was plain, nothing fancy, and his shoes were slightly worn. In his hands, he carried a stack of papers that looked far too heavy for one man to hold. His name was Marcus Daniels. To the casual observer, Marcus seemed nervous, his shoulders tight, his grip firm on the papers, his steps careful and measured. Some in the gallery smirked. To them, he looked out of place in a room filled with polished lawyers, expensive suits, and years of courtroom experience. But what no one realized, not even the judge himself, was that Marcus wasn't just another man dragged unwillingly into court. Marcus had come prepared. He had a plan. The case, at first glance, seemed simple. Marcus had been accused of fraud by Richard. Harlow, a wealthy businessman who had money, influence, and a reputation for crushing anyone who dared oppose him. Harlow wasn't just confident. He was arrogant. He believed this trial would be nothing more than a show, a chance to embarrass Marcus publicly and walk away victorious. But Harlow's smirk grew even wider when Marcus announced that he would represent himself. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room like a wave. No lawyer, no defense team? What kind of man walked into a legal battlefield alone, against professionals who had spent years sharpening their skills? Judge Whitmore, a gray-haired man with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, couldn't hide his amusement. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses with a smirk that carried more insult than words ever could. "Mr. Daniels," the judge began, his tone dripping with skepticism, "you do understand the seriousness of representing yourself, don't you? This isn't some high school debate club." The courtroom erupted in laughter. Even Harlow's team of lawyers chuckled, shuffling their thick folders and whispering jokes to one another. To them, Marcus was already defeated. But Marcus didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, his voice steady and calm. "I understand, Your Honor." Judge Whitmore shook his head. "Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you. To everyone else, Marcus looked like a fool. To the judge, he was a hopeless amateur. But behind Marcus's calm, steady gaze was something no one expected: knowledge, strategy, and an unshakable will to fight. The trial opened with all eyes fixed on Harlow's legal team. His attorneys, polished in designer suits and seasoned with years of experience, wasted no time striking hard. Their opening statement flowed like a rehearsed performance. They painted Marcus as nothing more than a manipulative con man, a man who had supposedly tricked a respected businessman into a shady deal. Their words were sharp, their tone dripping with confidence. Charts, documents, and thick binders were stacked high on the prosecution's table. Each page meant to bury Marcus under a mountain of evidence. The jurors leaned in, some even nodding as though the verdict was already decided. By the time Harlow's lawyers sat down, the entire courtroom seemed convinced that Marcus Daniels didn't stand a chance. Then Marcus rose. He didn't slam his hand on the table. He didn't pace the floor or shout for attention. Instead, he stood quietly, looking directly at the jury. His voice was calm but carried through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "sometimes the truth doesn't come wrapped in thick folders or fancy speeches. Sometimes it comes down to one simple question: who benefits from the lie?" The effect was instant. The room stilled. Even Judge Whitmore, who had been leaning back with a look of mild amusement, shifted forward, his expression changing ever so slightly. Cross-examination began, and this was where Marcus's brilliance came alive. He didn't try to overwhelm the witnesses. He asked simple, direct questions, questions that cut through rehearsed lies like a blade. "Mr. Green," Marcus addressed the accountant, "you claim I falsified invoices. Can you point to a document with my signature on it?" The man's hands shook as he shuffled through his files. Well, I don't seem to have that page with me." "No signature?" Marcus pressed. So your testimony is based on assumption, not fact? The jury's heads turned. The accountant's confidence collapsed as he slumped into his chair. Next came Harlow himself. He swaggered to the witness stand, arrogance radiating from him. But Marcus's questions stripped away that bravado. "Mr. Harlow," Marcus said firmly, "you claim I cheated you. Yet this contract," he held up a dated paper for all to see, "was signed before I ever joined your company. Your signature, your date. How could I possibly be guilty of fraud in a deal I wasn't even part of?" Gasps filled the courtroom. The jurors whispered. Even the judge's mocking smirk disappeared. Piece by piece, Marcus dismantled their lies until the once laughing courtroom sat in stunned silence. Every eye locked on him, not as a fool, but as the man in control. The tension inside the courtroom was so thick it felt like the air itself had weight. Every cough, every shuffle of paper echoed like thunder as the closing arguments began. Harlow's lawyers tried desperately to reclaim the ground they had lost. Their words were smooth, but their voices carried a nervous edge. They repeated their accusations, held up their charts and binders once more, and attempted to cast doubt where none remained. But the damage was done. Their arguments now felt hollow, their confidence cracked. The jurors' eyes no longer lit up at their polished speeches. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Marcus. And then it was his turn. Marcus rose slowly, gathering his stack of papers into a neat pile. His steps were deliberate as he approached the jury. He didn't need theatrics. His calm presence alone commanded attention. He looked into the eyes of the men and women who held his future in their hands. And with steady conviction, he began. "When I walked into this courtroom," he said, his voice clear, "you probably thought I didn't stand a chance. Maybe even the judge thought so." He glanced toward Judge Whitmore, whose smirk had long since faded, replaced by a faint unease. "But the truth," Marcus continued, "isn't about who has the most money, the fanciest lawyers, or the thickest stack of files. The truth is about facts, and the facts show that I did nothing wrong. The facts show that Mr. Harlow used this courtroom to hide his own failures, his own greed. He let the words hang heavy in the air. The silence was deafening. "Justice," Marcus said finally, his voice tightening with emotion, "doesn't care about wealth, or influence, or even skin color. Justice only cares about truth, and the truth is on my side." When Marcus sat down, not a sound filled the room. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman's voice rang out. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Daniels, not guilty." The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispers, even cheers. Harlow's face turned crimson with rage, his empire of lies collapsing around him. But Marcus stood tall, calm, and dignified. For the first time, Judge Whitmore looked at him not with ridicule, but with respect. "Mr. Daniels," he said quietly, "it seems I underestimated you. You've defended yourself brilliantly, and in doing so, you've exposed dishonesty in this very court. Well done." Marcus gathered his papers and walked out, not with arrogance, but with quiet dignity. He hadn't just won freedom. He had shattered every doubt, every stereotype, every mocking laugh. The man once dismissed as a fool had become the man no one could ignore. Marcus Daniels walked into that courtroom as the man everyone laughed at. But he walked out as the man no one could ignore. And just like Marcus proved them all wrong, you can prove people wrong too, by standing for truth and never giving up. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss more powerful stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.